This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. And my guest today is Barbara Ann Mojica. And I am really excited about this conversation and how it's going to go, because when we talk about Avoid the Maze, it's about getting through life's journey. And one of the journeys that all of us have to take when we're going to school is taking history classes. And if you have a great history instructor, you probably have a great experience. I can't remember one history teacher that motivated me to even pay attention in class. Not sure how I passed my classes, but I did. But today, I find it so interesting to go back and compare how things are today to how they were yesterday, and how things have evolved. And our history is very important to us, as I'm sure Barbara's going to share. And those of you who are watching on YouTube, not just listening to us on a stream, you will see a lot of wonderful designs behind Barbara. And she tells me they have something to do with her books. So Barbara, welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Karen. It's great to be with you today.
Thank you.
Well, I am a history buff from a very early age, unlike many other people. I grew up in a working class family, and I didn't have a lot of resources to travel, which now, of course, I love to do, or to visit historical places. But in school, I always loved history because I wanted to find out who these people were and why they went to the places they went to, and what was the motivation, and what did they discover. So I had an interest in history from an early date, and that was partially due to my own curiosity. And I didn't have a lot of books at home because both of my parents, while they encouraged me in my education, they weren't very well educated. Neither of them had anything more than high school. In fact, they didn't even finish high school. They were children of the Depression era. So
Got
they
it.
both went out to work at a very early age. But I just loved to learn. I had this curiosity and determination. So I went that route. And I didn't have a lot of opportunity to be able to go to college. So I had to work really hard. And at that time, there was an opportunity within the city system where I lived. At that time, I was living in New York City. And if you had the grades, you could apply to a city university, and it
Right.
would be tuition free if you had the grades. It was ultra competitive, but I was able to get myself in. So I got myself into college. And what do you think I majored in?
History.
I majored in history. So I was able to continue, and I just loved immersing myself in everything connected with history. So when you think about it, everything has a history, right? So
Oh, absolutely.
whether it's art, whether it's music, anything you can think of has a history. So when I started college, I was determined to immerse myself not only in history, but all of the disciplines that were allied with it. So I not only studied the history, but I studied the art, and I studied the anthropology, and I studied the classics because I was interested particularly in ancient history. So I became, proficient in a multidisciplinary way. And I was able to go to graduate school because I took courses during the summer, and one of my professors put my name in for a scholarship unbeknownst to me. And I got a scholarship to go to graduate school. So I went to graduate school for history. But when I got out, uh, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't want to teach in college, and I liked little kids, so I decided to go into education with kids. So my history kind of went on the back burner for a while as far as actively using it every day, and I didn't have the opportunity to teach it in school. I started working with young kids, and there wasn't too much history taught in school at that point. So that's something that has changed. With those of us who are older, know that when we went to school, history was a separate subject,
Yep,
and you had to pass history even in elementary school. Well, today that's not really the case because there's very little history taught in elementary school. It's not taught until you get to high school. And I think that's a missed opportunity because today, how much do our children know about where they live? Not very
absolutely.
much. They don't know anything about their government. They don't know anything about citizenship. They are just being inundated with uh, math and English and being taught to pass the tests. And everybody is in this quote common core situation, and we must all learn the same things and meet the same standards. And I learned very rapidly when I was teaching that children learn in different ways and need different things. And it took me a while to make the move, but after teaching for a very long time with the general education students in a normal, typical setting, I decided I wanted to work with children with special needs.
Okay.
So, and to be able to adapt different approaches to children's different learning styles. So I did that, and I started working with children on the opposite end of the spectrum. I started working with children that were severely delayed. So I worked with preschool children who were autistic or who had medical disabilities, were crack cocaine babies, all kinds of things. And I became really immersed in that. So I became a principal of a special ed school, and then I became an administrator. And I worked with all of these children with special needs. But my history was always back there. So I did this work for many years, and when I finally retired from education, that didn't last very long because I retired a couple of days and then realized I wasn't going to do very well in retirement.
Sounds familiar.
So I said, I'm going to combine my passions. I really want to get back to history because I saw how it was being sorely neglected, uh, and I started writing historical articles for a local news magazine first. And I still wanted to get back with kids. I wanted to get back with working with them. So I said, I want to write children's books. So I want to make learning about history fun. And I want kids to be inspired to become a part of history and to appreciate it again. So my husband, who is also an artist, uh, said, well, why don't I create a character for you to narrate your series? And that'll help, really making the
Sure.
approach fun. So he did. And he created a cartoon like character based on a younger version of me. And well, I don't know, you might be able to see this. I don't know if you
Oh,
can
it's fading.
it's
Yeah.
fading.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, Little Miss History is a younger version of me, and she wears a hiking outfit, kind of like a park ranger camper thing. And she wears pigtails, which I used to wear. She wears these oversized glasses that are rose colored because she has an optimistic view of the world. She wears oversized hiking boots. And those are in memory of my father's very large feet. And she's just this fun character. She's got big ears, the pigtails, she's a fun character.
Sure.
So she narrates the series, and the purpose of the series is to help children understand, again, the multidisciplinary approach of history. So in my books, I take children to places that are sometimes familiar, like Mount Rushmore, the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island, and sometimes there are national parks and outdoors like Sequoia National Parks, Mount Rushmore. Sometimes they're museums like the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum or the Battleship Iowa. Sometimes they're just iconic scenes of American history, like Independence Hall or the Wild West in Tombstone, Arizona. So there are a multitude of topics and places. So why do I choose these? Well, because they represent different types of history and different types of interest. And in my books, I don't present it as, well, this is the person, this is the place, this is what happened here. I create kind of an interactive experience. So what my aim is to have children and adults, if the adults are reading them aloud, to immerse themselves in the culture, in the experience, and all of the disciplines related to it. So, for instance, if you take my book on Mount Rushmore, I tell children about the secret room behind Mount Rushmore, which not too many people know about. I take them through the process of how it was built, but then we also talk about how the land was once given to Native Americans, to the Lakota Sioux, and how we took it back. And then we talk about the Native Americans and the Crazy Horse Memorial that they are building near Mount Rushmore. We talk about Native American rights. We talk about, what do they think? Do they think we should have one monument? Should we have two? What is their response to the way it was built? What is their response to a lot of the issues that are brought up in the book? And all of the books are like that. In the Sequoia National Park book, we talk about the sequoia tree. So I introduce a lot of science. We talk about how the trees grow, what they're used for, who were the early people who settled in the park. And we talk about the pollution, which is a big issue
Right.
in that park. It is the most polluted national park in the whole system. And sometimes it's dangerous to breathe the air there. And signs are posted to warn people of that. So
Interesting.
we talk about the environmental issues at all. What kind of solutions do they have? Can they think of anything? So all of my books are like that. They're multidisciplinary, and they introduce issues and questions and uh, critical thinking, because critical thinking is so important. And I think today in the schools there's a lot of emphasis on what we need to teach in order to get us from point A to point B, but
Exactly.
not how to think, how to process the information. And that's what critical thinking does. So when you study history, you learn how to become a critical thinker, because within critical thinking, you have to focus on a problem. And once you focus on some problem, you have to answer a whole series of questions. You have to look at the content, you have to look at the connections. How is it connected with the people? What people are involved? How is it connected with the circumstances? What else was going on that might have affected the way they were thinking? Uh, you have to go back to the primary sources. You have to look at what was available at that time. What were the letters? What were the journals? What were the diaries? Not what somebody wrote 200 years later, or not what somebody thinks today, but what was actually going on. And only after you look at all of those things can you come to some kind of conclusion. And in history, the conclusion is very often not one conclusion, but many conclusions. And that's what we're missing today in our schools. We always want to get the quote answer. And many times there is no one answer. There are many possibilities. And we, looking at it, can't necessarily come up with the one reason why. So I say that if you don't know your history, you don't know what you're talking about. That's my character, Little Miss History,
Sure.
saying, because history is an evolution. The day we're born, in effect, we become a character in history. We become part of something that has been going on before we were born, and something that is not only happening right now, but it's something that's going to happen in the future. So it's a continuous process. It's just like, suppose somebody has amnesia. How lost are they? Because they have no memory of where they came from,
Right.
and they have no memory of who they are today, and what's going to happen to them. How are they going to proceed in the future? So that's my way of thinking about it. And history is so important to us as a family, because
Yes.
each of our family is wrapped up in the memories of the people who came before us, our ancestors, and the people we're living with and working with now, and then and our future, the children of our children, what's going to become of them. So I think there's a lot we can do to encourage children to understand history as something that is very viable and living and growing with them, and teach them to go out in the community and look for history in the community. If we just ask them those questions, I wonder what, walking around and you see an old building, and you say to them, well, I wonder who lived there. I wonder what they did to earn a living. I wonder where they went to school. Children love to ask questions.
Right.
And if we as parents encourage them, and I know sometimes that can be difficult because they ask 5,000 questions at once, but we have to, encourage the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, because that's so important to critical thinking. And parents can help children think critically, as well as teachers in schools. And if we do all of that, we give them a strong foundation to not only understand where they are in their family and where they are in their immediate community, but where they are in the world. So it
Right.
gives them a perspective, and it gives them a moral sense of who they are and where they're rooted. And it also gives them a sense that there's a wider world out there around them.
Right.
There's a whole world, and there are a whole myriad of perspectives of people that are living in different cultures, in different places, and they eat different foods, and they share different opinions because their surroundings are so different.
Exactly. It's interesting when you said that you developed um, a learning process for special needs children. And my son, who I told you is a history buff, and just gets very aggravated when his peers have no idea of what happened even 5 years ago, let alone 500 years
100.
ago. Um, and he's on the spectrum. And I remember getting called to school one day saying, he's disturbing class. And I said, how's he disturbing class? He's asking too many questions. And what was happening was they were told to read an assignment and to then come up with a story about it. Okay. Well, he looked at it and I remember the teacher saying, he kept saying, why are we doing this? Why aren't we just talking about what we read? Why do I have to create a story? Okay. And he started, I think he was like fourth or fifth grade, and he kept asking for more books so he could find out what led up to this incident they was reading about. And he came home from school and he was crying and all upset. He says, why do I have to do what they asked me to do in school? Well, yeah, you just have to. Okay.
All right,
Um,
that's a big question.
right, exactly. But what I found was that whatever he was learning, whether it was math or English or art or music, he always wanted to know the history behind it. How did it develop? Why did it develop? And I'll tell you, his teachers did not like him for that. And that's a sad part because, again, as I told you before we came online, history to me, when I was going to school, was just a bunch of facts. Okay. And to take a test, I could never remember anything. And I was lucky to pass my classes, but it wasn't for until maybe about 20, 25 years ago, because of my son, that I started saying, how can I get to understand this better? How can I make it a little bit more entertaining for my brain? Okay, to start grasping it. And the more I read, the more I research, I just amazed at how much I missed out on, but I'm so glad I'm learning it now.
Never too late. But there are so many approaches that teachers could take. Uh, there would be so many other ways of doing that instead of doing a story. For instance, the teacher could have allowed a different approach and make like a take a folder and ask the child if they would rather tell the story in pictures, and
Interesting.
then
Yes.
find pictures, almost like a science project type
Right.
of thing. Put the pictures together and then let the child talk through the pictures instead of writing the story.
Well,
Oral
yep.
storytelling.
Yep. Well, and so many of us are visual learners. And so when you see something, it's so easy, for many of us to talk about it. I know when I went back for my master's degree, I decided to take online courses because I realized I learned better at my own pace rather than sitting in a classroom and maybe missing what the professor was talking about. And I realized how much more I enjoyed learning. And so I think this is really important that I know it's difficult for a teacher with 35 kids in the classroom to specialize for each of the kids. Um, but even as parents, we have to realize our children learn differently, maybe not like us, maybe not like their siblings. And, we have to feed them and get them in the right direction because, like you said, how can you move forward without knowing where you just came from?
Exactly. Exactly. And I,
So
I think schools could, I mean, schools could do that to a certain extent. But again, today, there's so much pressure and there's so much administration because of all of these tests and standards and learning theories. Teachers spend a lot of time with professional development training, but it's imposed from the top down, and it's not meeting the needs of the students, it's meeting the needs of whatever it may be, the political establishment, or the superintendent gets a grant for a certain funding, and then they have to go out and develop all of these programs to meet that funding. So, but parents, I think, uh, recently during COVID, became acutely aware of what is going on in the schools. They would never, they had never been exposed to
Right.
exactly what their child was learning. And that did give an impetus to, I think, a greater number of parents going out and finding alternatives. And I've myself, I believe that the money should follow the child's needs, not necessarily uh, the public school system. So I think parents should have more choices, whether that be homeschooling or a charter school, and developing a program that meets their child's needs better. So
Absolutely.
I think that that's something that may be given a lot more weight uh, to a lot of parents. And they're just seeing that, well, there is more than one way, and maybe my child isn't learning well this way. Maybe I don't like the curriculum. Maybe I feel it will be better to do things a different way. So I think in that sense, it's a good thing that there will be some changes, because a one size certainly doesn't
It's not.
fit all.
You're absolutely right. In fact, today, I was connecting with a high school friend of mine who I'm going to bring on to the podcast. And all I really remember about her back in high school, not only was she a cheerleader, but, she was acing all of her classes while I was like struggling just to pass my classes. Um, and yet, as adults, we finally have gotten to that place where, we're on an equal footing because we found what helps us move forward. And again, I got through school, I got through college, but I was struggling when I decided to take a look at the bigger picture and say, how can I learn this without it being, so overwhelming to me that I'm not understanding what I'm learning. And when that all started to happen, I realized, yes, I learn differently than my two sons, my husband, my brothers, you know, and that made me feel smart, probably for the first time in my life.
And we all have, different gifts. I mean, there's so many ways of learning. There's already all also so many types of learning.
Yes,
So we
absolutely.
all excel in some areas. Well, we're weaker in others, whether it's the kinesthetic, the hands-on learning, which so many children with special needs actually do well with the hands-on approach.
Absolutely.
So they may have speech impediments, and they may not do well with traditional communication techniques, but they do very well with hands-on. And of course, children that have behavioral differences, that they don't do well with social emotional learning, but they do very well with math or science, whatever. And autistic children, of course, some of them are savants in certain areas. So
Absolutely.
we're all good in certain areas, and we don't excel in others.
Absolutely. So, how can our listeners find your books? Because they sound amazing. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who are just looking for, a different pathway to help their kids, grasp some new information.
Well, the best place to go is my website, which is simply littlemisshistory.com. And from there, you can see the books, you can see previews of the books, you can see where to buy them. They're available worldwide. They're available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, online, bookshop.org, pretty much anywhere. They are easy to get. But in addition to the books, I have lots of other resources for parents. I keep very busy. So I have a blog, and I have tips for parents, tips for authors. I have book reviews. So twice a week, I try to do book reviews for all ages of kids. I also have a YouTube channel, and on my YouTube channel, do I have over 200 videos of some of them are mini teaching lessons for in all areas: science, math, literacy, history. Some of them are graphic organizers to help parents and teachers. I have kids' history videos, history told by kids for kids. I
I love
have
that.
travel videos to some of the places that I've mentioned in my books and others. And I have also a freebies on my blog. I have some free resources for parents, and there are also links on my Pinterest board. I have a Pinterest board and I save virtually everything I find that I think could be helpful. So I have things like book series for children on various topics. I have books by age. Uh, I have child rearing tips for parents. I have tips for authors. I have links to my YouTube videos and my lessons. So if they're looking for a quick, uh, you know, link to find something, they could try my Pinterest board. So from that website, you can link to the books, you can link to the blog, you can link to the YouTube channel, all of my social media. And also, there's even a little merchandise area where they can get Little Miss History
I love it.
paraphernalia.
That is wonderful. And I'm so glad your husband took part in it. That makes it, a little more exciting. Sometimes I know my husband gets involved with me in some of the podcasts, and I just feel like, hey, we're doing this together. And you know, it brings a smile to my face, just knowing that he likes what I'm doing as well.
Well, my
So,
husband also loves history, but
ah,
it's fun because it's fun, and we bounce off each other because sometimes my vision of the book, I write the book, and we go to the site in most cases, except places like the North Pole, which we
yeah,
haven't visited, and that for that book. But we collaborate, and then when he gets gives me his vision of the illustration, which isn't always what I had envisioned. So
right.
sometimes I need to revise. We need to talk it over again. So I probably write it, I probably edit it a dozen times at least, refine it and get it. It has to be broken down and broken down again because it has to be a very manageable length. But our books are a multimedia, so there are photography, our in most cases our pictures. So we have actual photos, and then we have the illustrations, which are portraits of the people involved, and then we have the Little Miss History character. So it's a real combination.
Of talents, yes.
It's a real effort of bringing everything we can together to inspire them and to interest them and to empower them, to think about these issues.
Absolutely. Well, Barbara, I want to thank you for joining us on Avoid the Maze. Um, I know that many of our listeners are going to be very, very excited hearing about this information. I have a group of teachers in the inner city here of Cleveland who are trying at this time of the year to really encourage and motivate their students. So I'm going to direct them to your website, because we all need to do a little something to learn and be motivated, and just bring a smile to our face some days. So
Exactly. We all need, especially these days, we need we
yep,
need a smile on our face.
absolutely. And again, thank you for joining us, and I'm so glad I met you online, and we'll have you back on again someday. Okay.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you for the opportunity to chat with your listeners.
Thank you. Have a great day now.
You too. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.